welcome to the Off the Charts Football Podcast. I'm Mark Simon. It's Conference Championship Week, and we're glad to be joined by SIS VP of Football, Matt Manocherian.
Hey, what's up, Mark?
I'll make an opening point about last weekend. Matt will too. And I think one thing that we can say about last weekend is that it was a good one for our team total points data. We do total points on a player basis, but if you do some summing up, you can come up with how teams rank overall. And in our rankings, we had the Bucs and Rams as 1 and 3 and barely separated. On a good day, 3 can beat 1. 3 did. And we basically had the 49ers and Packers even, despite the fact that the Packers were the number 1 seed and the 49ers were just 10 and 7. 49ers bore out our rankings quite well. Chiefs and Bills were basically even. That game was a toss-up. It was a toss-up. And we had said before that the Titans didn't rate well by total points. The Bengals were outside the top 10 too, but a decent amount higher than the Titans. They won. That's my take. Matt, what was your take on the weekend?
So it sounds like we should just skip the podcast and we go straight to what the numbers say.
Higher rankings. Absolutely.
The big conversation this week is the overtime rules after just the unbelievable weekend of football. As good a weekend of football as I can remember, as good a game as I can remember to cap it off. Everybody, of course, wants both teams to possess the ball in overtime. So conversation about this all week. I think it's really interesting, and I just wanted to take a moment to kind of think through it because some people say just extend the game. Both teams need to have the ball. Go as far as play out the full 15 minutes, and then you can have additional periods beyond that. I think it's important to keep in mind that the Players Association is going to have real problems with that. The Players Association, they might be amenable to adding a 17th and 18th game to the regular season, adding games to the playoffs because that's more money. There are more games, that's more money. Adding to the overtime is not as direct a line to more money, and that's a lot of exposure that they're putting on their bodies. And, even though we can all say how many plays is that really, these are plays at the end of a game after where your injury risk is up already because of all the strain, all that kind of stuff. So I think maybe that's going to be something that makes it very difficult, just the Players Association and how they figure in there. So I wanted to start the conversation with you, Mark. I've heard some interesting ideas from adopt the college system to getting rid of overtime in the regular season so that, games would just end in a tie at the end of regulation. I'm kind of partial to a system that, tell me what you think of this. You could have a coin flip at the end of the game. I didn't invent this. I can't remember where I heard it months ago. You have a coin flip at the end of regulation to decide kind of at the beginning of the game, like, do you want to receive or defer? But instead of having that choice here, you would have the choice of either bidding on a yard line or deferring. And if you bid on a yard line, what you end up doing there is you say, all right, I say your own 10-yard line. And if the other team can decide if they want to start with the ball on their own 10-yard line or if you want to start with the ball on your own 10-yard line. And depending on your team, the opponent, the game, the everything else going on, you can set that bidding wherever you want. And I think that teams would probably be over aggressive trying to get the ball first because having the ball first is really valuable. But I don't know where that ends. Like, would you take the ball first on your own 1-yard line? I don't think so. I think it adds a level of interest. And I think ultimately one team gets to do the bidding. The other team gets to choose what they want. It reminds me of the old, if you have a cookie and you have two kids that want to split it up, one of them gets to divide it. The other one gets to choose which side they want.
I feel like that has about as good a chance to get through, though, as 7-on-7.
Oh, come on. Why is that?
Because
I like when they put the dude on second base in extra innings. I don't want to stay at that game.
Right. That's like straightforward. Something involving bidding, it's like you're turning it into a $100,000 name that tune.
No, it's really simple because everybody's going to have like their model or whatever they do. They're going to have their instinct on what the right decision is. We already are doing a coin flip and deciding to receive, to defer, which end zone you want to defend. What if we just said, where do you want to start from? Or where would you want to kick the ball off from? It could be another way to phrase it. So you could theoretically have an onside kick on the opponent's 30-yard line. Would you rather be kicking off from your opponent's 30 or would you rather be receiving?
That gets very complicated very quickly.
No, it's so simple. It's one decision and both teams have the chance to get the ball first. So you don't need to do all this extra nonsense. All right, I'm not convincing you.
I think, you know what I think they should do? I think they should have a field goal competition.
Now, that is a horrible idea. Probably the worst idea I've ever heard in my life. Like, come on, a home run derby would be bad enough at the end of a baseball game. A soccer shootout is like the most miserable thing in the world.
Well, you could do the bidding of yard lines. You could be like, my guy can make it from 55. My guy can make it from 56.
I'd rather see the old like Madden version of the kicking competition, but by punters.
So well, I was just going to say, be happy I didn't suggest a punt off.
No, I would rather see the punt off. Who can get it closer to the goal line without being in the end zone? A little bit of like bocce type action. That to me is more exciting than a field goal kicking competition. Oh, that's gross.
All right. Well, what isn't gross is the conference championship games. The divisional round was fantastic. My dad's 75. He's watched football for 60-something years. He said that some of the games this weekend were among the best he's ever seen. Let's look ahead to the conference championship game. Start with Bengals-Chiefs at 3 Eastern. Bengals already won in KC. So is there anything in this regular season meeting that you're paying particularly close attention to as relates to this week?
This was the Jamar Chase game from a few weeks ago where he just went off for 200 whatever yards. Absolutely ridiculous. Joe Burrow was on fire. And in that game, as you pointed out earlier to me, short dropbacks is what the Bengals like to do. And in that game, it was mostly those short dropbacks out of 11 personnel. So out of 3 wide receiver sets, that's what we're talking about when we say 11 personnel. They were 90% pass in that game. And of those passes, they were 95% short dropbacks. So this is what Joe Burrow likes to do. He likes to get the ball out of his hands quickly. They like to scheme it up that way. They know they can't block anybody, and they just want to have more receivers than you can defend and get the ball out of there. They obviously have great weapons. It's the same sort of formula that he used in his record-setting season at LSU. So I think it's on Spags to see if he can come with a different strategy to get them out of it, because whatever they were doing in that first game did not work. Now, what did they do? The Chiefs, they were mixing up their pre-snap looks. So they were showing both 1 and 2 high pre-snap, but they ended up rolling into mostly those middle of the field open coverages, right? Cover 2, cover 4, I think most of the time. However, it was on the times when they rolled into a single high, when they stayed single high, that's where they got punished. That's where those Jamar Chase big plays were coming down the outside of the field. So what can I expect from the Chiefs? What do I think Spags will do? I think we might see some more 3-man rushes, dropping 8 into zones. And that was a look that gave Cincinnati a little bit more trouble the limited time that they used it in that last matchup. I think we're going to see some experimentation with it. The Bengals will certainly have some answers for what to expect from there. It could be some screens. It can be more just running the ball against those light looks. But I think Spags is going to have to really try to avoid getting into those single high situations, because Burrow's going to take that shot to Chase every time. And, I'm not saying he can go for 200 again, but I don't think you want to give him any sort of a chance to.
Matt, how good is Joe Burrow right now?
Joe Burrow's playing great right now. He is a win-with quarterback at this point in his career. So you know how we always like to tear guys off. I don't think you're going to win a Super Bowl because of Joe Burrow quite yet, but I do think it's been really impressive the way that he's been able to transfer that skill that we were just talking about, that he showed at LSU, which is get 5 guys into routes. We'll have these light protection systems and make me responsible for the hot, make me responsible for the extra rusher, and get the ball out of there. He got sacked a whole bunch of times last week. Titans certainly brought some difficult things to the table defensively for them, as will the Chiefs. So it remains to be seen if that strategy, he won the national championship with it. I don't know if they can win the Super Bowl with it.
How big is the gap between him and Mahomes?
I still think it's pretty big. I think Mahomes is playing as good football as probably any quarterback that's ever played. Quarterback play today is better than it has been historically. Obviously, the rules are more favored for quarterbacks. The quarterbacks themselves are better. But I mean, for the past, 3-4 year span, Patrick Mahomes is he's absolutely otherworldly. He is the reason why the Chiefs are the Super Bowl favorite for me this year, last year, next year, and for the foreseeable future.
They were the Super Bowl favorite in week 1. They were the Super Bowl favorite in week when they were struggling. They're the Super Bowl favorite right now. And let's talk some Chiefs.
Could have made some money if you listened to me around like week 8. Be hedging right now.
The Chiefs ranked number 1 in the NFL in effectiveness in shotgun and effectiveness when using motion. And when I say effectiveness, I'm talking positive percentage. They're top 5 in terms of how often they use both of those setups. How will that factor into this game, and what can the Bengals do to help them counter that?
We saw this in week 17 also. It was 81% shotgun and 66% motion in that game. So again, the teams were staying with what they did, and they had a positive EPA on 66% of those plays with motion. That same positive percentage stat you just gave. So the Bengals have struggled all year playing zone coverage when their opponents use motion, which is kind of an interesting little split that I don't know, it would have been obvious to think about if we weren't kind of digging into the numbers there. They play more zone than man across the board, but it's been the snaps where they stayed in their zone against motion from the offense where they really struggled. It's where they really struggled in that game. And it'll be interesting to see if they check to a little bit more man to counter in those looks. So I'll be looking out to see when the Chiefs use that pre-snap motion. Do the Bengals kind of stay with what they've been doing? Are they going to be exposed there? Or do they maybe try to check to a bit more man, even though that's a tall task against Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce?
Could you see the Bengals defense having a good day?
I can see them giving some problems with some of their pass rush. If they can, anytime you can affect the game from the pass rush, I think that's the best way to play coverage against a team like the Chiefs. It's very hard to just cover those dudes back there. So I don't expect them to have a good day. No, I think the Chiefs, I don't know if they'll pick up right where they left off against the Bills, but I do think that the Bills are a better defense than Cincinnati. And it looked like when the Chiefs are on, there's nothing you can do there. So I would be surprised. I think that the Chiefs are rightfully the favorites here. Big part of that is because of their offense against that Bengals defense. But crazier things have happened.
Matt, I want to talk a counter to something that you just said. The Bengals pass rush by our total points does not rank in the top half of the league, yet they've got these two guys on the ends that are, from what we can see, pretty good. What's going on there?
When you talk about Hendrickson and Hubbard, they've certainly had good production this year. Hendrickson, I think, was a great offseason pickup. And even the guys on the inside that have gotten most of the action there, Ogunjobi and BJ Hill, those guys have all had good sack production. They've had good pressure production, but it's been really, that's it. It's like really, really stark when you start to look at it and you start to compare. Those first two guys have about as many sacks and pressures as the rest of the whole team combined. And then when you add in those two tackles as well, that's almost literally all of the production. You're at something like 80% of the production, just kind of glossing it over right now. So it's probably a question of depth and a question of, can those guys get it done? Because they're the ones that are going to get those pass rush snaps.
Chiefs' offensive line has been very good this season. We'll get a test in this game on Sunday. Does home field advantage mean anything for this game?
I don't think so. At this point, there's a few years of evidence that home field advantage isn't really moving the needle and really, it's hard to say that it's going to move it in one game and not the other. I'm sure the Chiefs are happy to be back at home after that miserable day in Cincinnati several weeks ago, or a few weeks ago. But whether you look at just the course of this season, if you look at the course of the last three seasons, because 2020 might be a little bit weird. If you look as recent as last week in the divisional playoffs, the home field just has not had a predictable effect on the winners, as much as Ryan Tannehill would have liked what I knew would never happen to happen.
Injury-wise, the big thing for this game that we should look at, Tyron Matthews has a concussion. At the time that we were taping, they were saying they were hoping he was going to practice on Thursday, hope he would be able to play. He said earlier in the week, I got this when it came to coming back. How impactful could he be in this game?
I think he's irreplaceable. I think that, we talked about earlier in the season when the Chiefs were struggling, what changes could they make? They made the change bringing in Melvin Ingram to help what they were doing up front, allowing them to, like we said, kind of get their whole front better by improving not just the defensive end position, but also by improving the defensive tackle position. By the way, they were able to kind of rejigger their lineup at that time. What they couldn't do was try to replace people on the back end, because what Spags does back there is so complicated and requires such communication. There was evidence of it when the Bills scored their last touchdown in the game on Sunday. It was Gabriel Davis lined up against DeAndre Baker. DeAndre Baker, the talented youngster who was drafted by the Giants, who got into legal trouble, ended up being cut there and making his way over to the Chiefs finally this year. He came in as the fourth corner. And the reason why he got broken so badly by Gabriel Davis on that last touchdown was because he was aligned improperly. He had the improper leverage on the play and was not up to speed with what the Chiefs' mentally challenging pass defense asks of him. So Tyron Matthews, the guy that orchestrates everything on the back end for the Chiefs, I think that his absence was a big part of the reason why they fell apart defensively last week. And I think that for them to have their best chance to hang with this high-powered offense, he's, like I said, irreplaceable.
Just straight up here, Chiefs have an advantage going into this game. Maybe not a huge advantage, but an advantage nonetheless.
Yeah, I think the Chiefs are the favorite, which I'm sure you're tired of hearing me say for the last 20 weeks or whatever.
Every game. Let's segue to 49ers Rams. Head-to-head, 49ers beat the Rams in both games, one in highly improbable fashion to get into the playoffs. Kind of reminded me of like the 2007 Colorado Rockies going nuts at the end of the season, winning at the very end, getting into the playoffs, and then doing some damage against good teams. Was there any knowledge gleaned from these first two meetings that will be important to know going into this one?
Yeah, so close game in week one and then a blowout about halfway through the year. Tons to glean from those matchups and from even before that. That goes way before this season even.
It was week 10.
Week 10, right. So Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay know each other well. They've worked with each other before. I think a big part of the reason why San Francisco was able to immunize Aaron Rodgers from the playoffs was because of Shanahan's understanding of what LaFleur wants to do offensively. And I think that's a big part of the reason why San Francisco has had the Rams number lately. I think Shanahan really, in a lot of ways, has taught these guys a lot of what they do. And so he really understands the reasons why they do the things that they want to do. And I think that's given him somewhat of an advantage. But, it's more than just familiarity. It's also the actual matchups.
All right, let's talk about the matchup. The 49ers used 21 personnel the most in the NFL. They used motion the most in the NFL. We mentioned the Chiefs were number 2. Like I said before, with the Bengals, it's a case for both of these, 21 and for motion, high volume, good quality. Not necessarily top-notch quality, but good quality. How does this factor into the game, and are the Rams well suited to handle it?
I think this is a huge factor, and just like I was saying before with these matchups, the Rams have an extreme preference in terms of both usage and efficiency. So they do it more, and they're better when they do it in terms of having a light box and rolling into lots of different zone looks, right? They'll show mostly too high before the snap, but they'll also roll into cover 3 variants a good chunk of the time out there too. But what they have in common is it's usually a light box, and usually it's going to be a zone after the snap. So I think that plays into the Niners doing exactly what the Niners want to do. I think that's why they're built the way that they are, because they know who they have to compete with. It's going to be a lot of heavy personnel groups, a lot of 21 and 22 personnel, lots of motion, lots of zone running from the Niners. They're going to try to slow down and control the game. They want to make the Rams play left-handed, and the way to do that is to make the Rams get out of those too high looks and those zone shells, forced to do the things that they don't want to do. So I think that from a matchup perspective, even though I think the Rams are a stronger team, I think that the Niners have a really nice strategic kind of alignment there.
Is that a credit to Shanahan, or is that a credit to some other people that maybe we don't know about?
I think it's a credit to the way that the team's built. So you can credit Shanahan, you can credit John Lynch, you can credit all the different people that are doing the work on the personnel side, on the analytics side, on the coaching side, behind the scenes. But the way that the team is built, it seems to me that if Bill Belichick has shown us, well, he's shown us lots of things, but one thing that he's taught us is you want to zig where others zag. There is an advantage in football to be doing things that other teams are not doing, because then you're prepared for what you're doing every week, and they're only prepared to see what you bring to the table every now and then. Another advantage is you can find players that actually fit your scheme because you're not competing with everybody else for the same type of players that you need to fit into whatever the scheme du jour is in the NFL. So I think that there's been a strategic decision made by the 49ers to build this way. I think it's informed a lot by Mike Shanahan and the way that he'd want to build a team, which is really from the running game on the offensive side and out from there, from that zone running game, and then marrying everything off of that. So I think it's been a very coherent strategy for them. I think that they've bared through it. I still think they're figuring things out at the quarterback position, and it's a little bit TBD there, but there's a reason why they're in the Final Four, and that's because I think they've taken this strategy of being a bit more of a run team, a bit more of a heavy personnel team at a time where a lot of the NFL is trying to figure out ways to not defend the run and spread teams out all over the place.
I remember when John Lynch was hired as the San Francisco 49ers GM, that there was this sense of intrigue that someone would go from the booth to that.
I'll tell you one that I'm looking forward to, and that's Sean Payton probably heading to the booth this year. I think that's going to be awesome. You know, Drew Brees has been moderately interesting from there. I don't think Sean's going to pull any punches.
So that's going the other way, as opposed to Lynch going from the booth to the front office. Let's segue to the Rams. The Rams use 11 personnel the most often in the league. They rank top 3 in the league in usage of no huddle, play action, and zone run. And I realize that some of these things are not necessarily related to the others, but in terms of tendencies, that's what we know. Is there a tendency within those that I pick that will be particularly impactful? And given that the 49ers have this great pass rush, great run defense, are they well equipped to stop it?
Yeah, same story like we were talking about before. The zig where they zag, it's been on both sides of the ball for the Niners. And I think they give the Rams a lot of problems if they can sort of control the game by being so stylistically different. Over the second half of the season, they're consistently a four-man front. They're consistently a light blocks, rarely blitzing. They want to get home with just those front four guys. And they dominate out of their middle of the field open zones. That's cover 2 and cover 4 looks. So again, it switches right back over. It puts the pressure on the Rams. Can the much maligned Cam Akers and the other running backs from the Rams, Akers coming off those 2 fumbles, but looking like the strongest ball carrier that the Rams probably have, can he get them out of that? Can he do something? Can the Rams running game get them to the point where the Niners can't just stick with their four-man front, light boxes, 2 high safeties for those cover 2 and cover 4 looks? Again, it's going to be a question, who can make who play left-handed? So I think it's another great matchup where, again, I think the Rams are a little bit better offensively than even the Niners are defensively, but I think the Niners, again, have a sort of matchup problem that could be difficult for the Rams to overcome. Man, especially without Robert Woods, because he's so meaningful to the way that they marry their run and pass game together.
Going back to something that you said earlier, maybe this goes off the grid a little bit. The 49ers and the Rams, you talked about the idea of zigging versus zagging. If you're talking about team building in the NFL, how high do they rank on the list of models to follow for how you should run a team?
I mean, it seems like the top 4 based on
that's a cop out answer. I was looking who else is in that group?
I think they're what they have in common. They come from the same scheme family, and I think that scheme family is showing to be a little bit stronger in most cases than what's going on, and that's why we're seeing it proliferate around the league so much. Right? It was no coincidence that last week we were talking about McVay, Shanahan, LaFleur, all competing as 3 of the last 4 teams in the NFC. I think that this Mike Shanahan style offense, the zone run game, married to the play action, that puts the offense in a good situation to succeed. I think it's been one of the stronger schemes out there for a while, and I think that probably has a lot to do with why we're seeing both of these 2 teams there. Now, to your point, they are zigging and zagging. They might have that same underlying core concept of what they want to do, but man, the window dressing is a lot different, right? With the Niners, it's 21 personnel. It's this base front 4 look. With the Rams, it's been 11 personnel. It's been being aggressive in bringing in Matthew Stafford to try to upgrade what the offense can do and how they can marry things off of that and put pressure on a defense. And it's been really kind of like a star-based system when you look at them defensively, where not a lot of stars on the Niners defense. Lost to DeForest Buckner a couple of years ago. Certainly they've got Bosa. Certainly they've got Wagner. But this is not a team that's built on an Aaron Donald and a Jalen Ramsey in that same way. So they're a little bit of different flavors. I think that you always have to be figuring out based on who you are, based on what assets you have available to you, what you want to become, and making sure that you're being cohesive there. But it's the players, it's the coaches, and it's the scheme. And these 2 teams both seem to have done a good job of marrying those together.
Injury-wise, the Rams should get Andrew Whitworth back from a knee and ankle injury. That said, they were happy with Joe Noteboom and how he played in the divisional round. Noteboom's banged up this week. He's got a chest injury. Whitworth, they're hopeful that he's going to play. What impact can he have on a game?
Where does Noteboom rank for you on the name ranking scale? Do you like that name as much as I do?
It was awesome. I encountered it for the first time, and I was like, oh, that's very cool.
When we look at Whitworth, the EPA can be quantified basically. The impact can be quantified based on the expected points added that the Rams have created with and without him on the field. So this is a great aspect of anybody who's a subscriber to the SIS Data Hub Pro. They'll know about the on-off tendency reports. And one thing that comes along with those tendencies is the impact. And so for offensive linemen, we can see Andrew Whitworth and the Rams have been 10 expected points added per 60 passes better when he's on the field. They've actually been 2 EPA per 60 runs worse when he's on the field. So the impact has been in the passing game, and that makes sense. He's a left tackle. He's a guy that when he's in there, you're never worried about the blindside pressure. But at this point in his career, probably isn't bringing a whole bunch of extra oomph to their run game. So the impacts on the passing game, I think they're just the trustworthiness that you can have with him in there.
Trent Williams also banged up. He is expected to play on Sunday against the Rams. How impactful is he as an offensive tackle at this point?
Hugely impactful. Not the same sample of games missed as Whitworth. Neither of these guys have had a huge sample of games that they've missed this season. So take all of this with a grain of salt. But even smaller sample of time that Williams has missed. The Niners are 10 EPA per 60 plays better in each phase when he's on the field compared to off the field. So like they're 10 points better per game with him on the field than off the field. So
he's needed.
He's a huge impact for them. And when you turn on the film, he's playing the best football of his career.
And to close, let's talk about huge impact players, Debo Samuel and Cooper Kupp. We can rehash it here. We talked about it a little bit in the past few weeks. Samuel got banged up against the Packers. How will they impact this game?
These guys are as impactful receivers as we have in football right now. They're everything, especially with no Robert Woods for the Rams. All eyes on Cooper Kupp, obviously ODB, Odell Beckham Jr. And then Debo Samuel, you look at his side of things, and it's not just what he's doing as a receiver, but also what he's doing out of the backfield that is going to be where he shows his impact. I know I spent a lot of time talking earlier about how both of these teams are going to want to find ways to affect the other team's personnel groups, to affect the other team's ability to play light boxes and keep safeties back. These are the reasons why those teams want to keep those safeties back, why they want to devote those resources. And how about another thing for the way that the Niners are built that is a feather in their cap? Debo Samuel, maybe with the only exception being down in Atlanta, one of these players that can line up as a true receiver and be a monster from that position, but also as a running back, really creates issues for you from a personnel standpoint when you're playing against him, right? Because do you treat him like a wide receiver? Do you treat him like a running back? It becomes something where no matter what you choose, you're wrong. And I think that's these two players are special, so we should just enjoy them.
These teams have made a lot of right choices the last few weeks. So they'll be playing on Sunday night at 6:30. We're going to do something a little different to end the show. We know that some of you like to play props, make picks. We have tools that can help you do that. So we turn to SIS gaming guru Corey March to share his thoughts.
Thanks, Mark. I'm coming to you with 3 data-driven prop recommendations for Championship Sunday. The first is Bengals tight end CJ Uzoma to go over his receiving yards prop. The number is currently at 35.5, which is already up from where it opened at 33.5. Uzoma's been a key part of the Bengals offense down the stretch, racking up an 18% target share in games he's played since Week 15. That number has been even higher in the Bengals' 2 playoff games, where Uzoma has been second on the team in targets in both games and hauled in 64 yards in the wildcard round and 71 yards last week. SIS projects Uzoma for 48 yards, 13 more than the sportsbooks expect, which is the biggest margin out there out of all the receiving props on the board this week. You can get your hands on this week's SIS projections for $9.99, which gives you access to our projections for each key stat category that you need to crush the prop bet market this weekend. You can find them by visiting sportsinfosolutions.com and clicking to the online store under the Solutions dropdown. Moving on to the second recommendation, which is a fan favorite, a touchdown scorers parlay. We're giving you one player from each game to score an anytime touchdown. From the first game, we're calling on Byron Pringle. Pringle leads the Chiefs with 3 receiving touchdowns in the playoffs and leads the team in end zone targets over the last 5 weeks. Sportsbooks have made him the 7th most likely player to find the end zone in the AFC Championship at plus 190. The second player is Odell Beckham Jr. at plus 140. Like Pringle, he also leads his team in end zone targets over the last 5 weeks. Beckham Jr. has emerged as the Rams' top intermediate receiving threat, which is the biggest weakness of the 49ers pass defense. Parlaying the 2 scores will give you some very friendly odds around plus 600. The third recommendation is a DraftKings Conference Championship Special. DK is offering plus 450 odds for all 4 starting quarterbacks to go over 250 passing yards. Sure, there's a chance that one of Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, or Matthew Stafford doesn't clear the mark, but based on the DK prop numbers and the SIS projections, it's expected that all three will reach 280 yards. When you look at it that way, it's essentially very favorable odds for whether or not Jimmy Garoppolo will get there, which he's done in half his starts this season. The hope is that the 49ers will need to ratchet up the pass offense in order to win the game.
Thanks, Corey. And this wraps up our episode for Conference Championship Week. For Matt Manocherian and Corey March and our producer Justin Stein, I'm Mark Simon. Thank you for listening to the Off the Charts Football Podcast.